What's good with the YouTube of Convicts Perspective? It's your boy Flacco coming live and direct, smashing through, sliding through with a little bit of energy. And I got my co-host, Big Senor Rojo. And as you can tell by the title, man, we're going to talk about an iconic figure within the Mexican Mafia, the legendary Joe Pegleg Morgan. We found a really quite interesting article that goes into a lot of details. There's a few discrepancies in this article that we'll touch base up on a little bit after. But for the most part, man, it's a really in-depth look at this individual. And I'm going to be able to elaborate a few other facts at the end of this video, as well as Senor Rojo.
All right, man. This story comes from a place called thecellblock.net, and it's called the Joe Morgan story. Joe Morgan was born April 10th, 1929 to Croatian immigrants in San Pedro, California. Shortly after, he and his mother moved to the Mafia projects in East LA. In the late 1930s, he joined Ford Mafia, a Chicano street gang, and one of the oldest documented gangs in Los Angeles. When Morgan was 16, he became romantically involved with a 32-year-old woman. Even at a young age, he had a thirst for blood, and he demonstrated this when he beat the woman's husband to death with a tire iron and buried him in a shallow grave in the Malibu Hills. He was eventually caught, and although a minor, he was held at the Los Angeles County Jail. While awaiting trial, the criminally crafty Morgan posed as his cellmate who was awaiting transfer to a juvenile facility and escaped. He was recaptured shortly thereafter and convicted of second-degree murder and was then sent to San Quentin State Prison, where he served 9 years. Morgan paroled in 1955, but just a year later, he robbed a West Covina bank using a machine gun. He made off with a little bit over $17,000, but was ultimately caught and sent back to prison. According to Mexican Mafia member turned FBI informant Rene Boxer Enriquez, Morgan was shot in the leg during the robbery, which caused him to lose his leg. William Dunn, police officer and writer, says Morgan was shot in the leg while hiding from law enforcement for murder. Prison officials began referring to Morgan as Peg Leg, though nobody called him that to his face. And he certainly didn't let something as minor as the loss of his own leg slow him down. He was the one-legged man that you hear about in the ass-kicking contest, says Richard Valdemar, a retired 33-year Los Angeles Sheriff's Department veteran gang investigator. He was a champion on the prison handball courts. He was physically fit and very able to move around and fight. The Mexican Mafia transferred a number of the young MA members to San Quentin State Prison in 1957. At Duell Vocational Institution, a California youth authority that is now an adult prison in Tracy, California, a group of young Chicano street gang members came together to create the Mexican Mafia, also known as La M, a gang of gangs, as a way to protect themselves from prison predators and other gangs, such as the Bluebirds, the original members of the Aryan Brotherhood. By 1961, according to famed crime reporter Chris Blatchford, administrators at DVI, alarmed by the escalating violence committed by the Mexican Mafia, transferred a number of the young MA members to San Quentin State Prison in hopes of discouraging their behavior by intermingling them with the older, more seasoned convicts. However, this plan backfired. According to legend, Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena, one of the young MA members transferred to San Quentin, who was already in prison for stabbing someone to death, was met by a 6'5", 300-pound black prisoner who kissed him on the face and declared that the scrawny 18-year-old would be his bitch. A short time later, Cheyenne returned with the shank, a prison-made knife, walked up to the unsuspecting predator, and brutally stabbed him to death in front of more than 1,000 inmates on the yard, all of who refused to step forward as witnesses. This not only got the Mafia an enormous amount of respect on the yard, it solidified the wise beyond his years Cheyenne as a fearless gang leader. Also in 1961, Morgan was transferred from Folsom State Prison to the Los Angeles County Jail so he could testify on behalf of another prisoner. However, this was just a guy so that the criminal mastermind could escape. He ended up leading 11 other inmates through a pipe shaft, reportedly using hacksaw blades he hid in his fake leg. The escape was the largest break in Los Angeles County Jail history and featured on the front page of the LA Times. Morgan was caught a week later, however, while shopping for groceries, but not without bolstering his legend as a certified criminal mastermind. Many claim Morgan as one of the founders of La M. Upon Morgan's recapture, he was sent to San Quentin. Already from a barrio, Chicano street gang, and running with Chicanos, Morgan began running with members of the MA, becoming best friends with their leader, Cheyenne. With Cheyenne's reputation built on blood, and Morgan's also built on blood, having already done time for murder and suspected of having committed others, along with jailbreaks, their friendship seemed a perfect match. Morgan, 14 years older and more experienced as a criminal than Cheyenne, became his criminal mentor. Morgan helped him build up the newly formed Mafia. Because of this, many claim Morgan is one of the founders of La M, but others say he wasn't one of the founders, though he was a major part of its architecture and organizing. As far as we were concerned, he was Mexican, members had said. Joe was an official member until 1972 after Cheyenne was killed. Don't get me wrong, he was one of the fellas and highly respected, but he wasn't officially brought in until after Cheyenne was killed because originally you had to be of a Mexican descent to be a member, said Danny Paki Nava, a former member of the MA who was brought in 1977 by first generation member Abraham Hernandez and Robot Salas. After Cheyenne was killed, though, they wanted Joe to officially take the chair since he had the majority of connections anyway, and that's when he was formally inducted. As far as we were concerned, he was Mexican, said former Mexican Mafia hitman Raymond Mundo Mendoza. If anyone ever called him a white boy, I have no doubt he would have killed them. He knew what he was as far as his genes were concerned, but his heart was Chicano. Morgan spoke fluent Spanish, studied Mexican and Aztec history, and taught himself how to speak Nahuatl, an ancient Aztec dialect. Morgan, known for his skin-shaved head, wooden leg, dark piercing eyes, and appetite for blood, led the Mafia along with Cheyenne to prominence in the California prison system by terrorizing unorganized ethnic groups, primarily other Mexicans and Chicanos, and getting control over things such as drug sales, porn, extortion, prostitution, as well as even murder for hire. As the Mafia's power increased, the gang spread like wildfire throughout the California prisons. They became a major power player in the proverbial game of prison. Eventually, however, like oftentimes when people acquire an enormous amount of power, an abuse of such power can follow. And Chicano prisoners who were not affiliated and therefore open to prey by the Mexican Mafia, becoming fed up with members of the MA bullying them, stealing their valuables, and sometimes even stabbing them and killing them. As a result, in the mid-1960s, a group of them in Soledad State Prison secretly came together and formed their own gang, which they called Nuestra Familia, Spanish for our family. Many of the early members in Nuestra Familia were from Southern California, but they soon began to attract Chicanos from Northern California, who the Mafia treated as inferior, claiming they were just a bunch of fameros. Tensions arose, eventually boiling over in 1968 when Robot Salas, an MA member from East LA, stole a pair of shoes from a northern Chicano. This kicked off a riot in which 19 prisoners were stabbed and one MA associate was murdered. And from this point on, the NF was established as a major rival of the Mexican Mafia. Morgan continued to expand La MA, creating alliances with other crime syndicates like the Aryan Brotherhood, Mexican drug cartel members who were incarcerated in California, and even the Italian Mafia that was operating in Los Angeles. He was extremely business savvy and charismatic. His ability to forge relationships with the Italian Mafia, the Aryan Brotherhood, and Mexican drug cartels was due to his people skills, says Rodrigo Rivera Diebre, author of Urban Politics, the Political Culture of Sur 13 Gangs. Joe Morgan was known to be a leader. With his savvy, his manipulative skills, his intelligence, his charisma, and his knack for being profitable, he could easily have been the president of a major corporation, says Mendoza. But while there was a side to Morgan that was humane and personable, Mendoza says part of him was cruel and cold-blooded. Joe Morgan had two personalities, says Valdemar. One level-headed and diplomatic who intended to do business the right way, but if you crossed the Mexican Mafia, he'd be the first to go to war. He did his share of killing. When he killed, he became a different person. He was very, very violent when he wanted to be and participated in plenty of stabbings. It's not like he was the financial arm or the diplomatic arm. He was just a good soldier for the Mexican Mafia, just as violent as any of the other gang members. When Morgan got out of prison in the late 60s, early 70s, he did so with the objective of taking the gang to new heights. He didn't only want to control prison, he wanted to control all of Los Angeles, starting with East LA. He began taxing Chicano street gangs. If they wanted to sell dope, they had to buy it from La M. If they wanted to engage in other profitable crimes, they'd have to kick a portion up of the profits to the mafia. Failure to do so, and they'd face the gang's wrath when they went to prison, where they'd surely end up eventually. Morgan sent this message clearly: buy our dope and pay us a tax or die. You hear about the Italian mob sometimes breaking your leg or intimidating you or threatening you, but the Mexican mafia guys will kill you. There were all these deaths that were occurring in the streets in the 70s, and that was the Mexican mafia taking over the drug industry in East LA, as well as the surrounding areas. Morgan used the underworld network he built to further the mafia's agenda. He outsourced mafia murders to the bloodthirsty Aryan Brotherhood. He used his Mexican drug cartel connects to smuggle kilos of heroin and cocaine into Los Angeles, and he collaborated with the Italians on white-collar crimes and by supplying them with drugs from his Mexican connections. In 1971, Morgan committed the first prison gang street execution in Los Angeles when MA member Alfonso Paqui Alvarez began collecting taxes from street gangs without kicking up a share of his profits to the mafia members behind bars. Morgan shot him twice in the head. His body was later found in a secluded area in Monterey Park. Meanwhile, in prison, Cheyenne, who was active in Latino political organizations like the Brown Berets, had a vision of statewide dominance, both in prison and out, and wanted to unite La M with the Nuestra Familia. This was reportedly looked down upon by Morgan and other members of the mafia, and this was where a couple of conspiracy theories take place. In December of 1972, Cheyenne arranged to be transferred to Chino State Prison for a peace discussion with NF member Death Row Joe Gonzalez. Reportedly, in an effort to sabotage the mission, MA leaders had 2 NF members killed, essentially ending any possibility of peace. In response to the 2 NF members being killed on December 17th, the NF stabbed Cheyenne over 50 times, beat him with a pipe, threw him over the 3rd tier on the concrete floor, where he was stabbed several more times. One theory is that the MA only wanted to sabotage the peace talk, unaware that Cheyenne would still be put in a position to be harmed. Another theory is that the MA had turned their back on Cheyenne and knew they were putting him in position to be killed. Those who believe La M had not turned their backs on Cheyenne, however, point out that as a result of his murder, La M put a kill-on-sight order on all members of the Nuestra Familia. And in just the first year after the murder, 31 prisoners were killed in a tit-for-tat war. What actually happened regarding the murder of Cheyenne, we may never truly know. What we do know, however, is that Morgan became the official godfather of the Mexican mafia from this point forward until he died. In 1977, Morgan was convicted of trying to arrange the murder of a Seal Beach drug dealer for failing to pay tax money to the Mexican mafia. Unaware that MA member Ramon Mundo Mendoza had turned on him, he asked Mendoza to commit the murder, supplying him with a picture of the intended target, a house key, and a .45 caliber pistol inside of a brown paper bag. Mendoza testified against Morgan, and Morgan received a life sentence. In December of 1989, California opened the doors to the notorious Pelican Bay State Prison, which contained a new state-of-the-art lockdown security housing unit, or SHU, as it's often called, where California would send its high-profile prison gang members, including Morgan. Morgan continued to manage the Mexican mafia from his prison cell in Pelican Bay, despite being locked down 23 hours a day and having virtually no physical contact with other humans. In 1992, Morgan and other members of the Mexican mafia, including Cheyenne, were cast into the public eye in the release of actor and producer Edward James Olmos' movie American Me, which was fictional but based on some actual events. Morgan and other members of the mafia were outraged by the movie, especially the portrayal of Cheyenne, who was called Santana in the movie and played by Olmos himself. In the movie, Santana was sodomized by a white inmate when he immediately retaliated against killing, probably inspiring the story of Cheyenne being kissed by the black inmate who he later came back and stabbed to death. And also because in the movie, Santana was killed by members of the MA after falling out of favor with them, which was probably inspired by the theory Morgan and the MA had set Cheyenne up to be murdered by the NF. In the movie, members of the mafia killed Santana, very similar to the way he was killed by Nuestra Familia in real life. As a result of American Me, Morgan ordered the murders of 3 past and present mafia members and associates who served as consultants for Olmos and movie producers. Charlie Brown Manriquez, a member of La M, was murdered in the LA housing project in March of '92, less than 2 weeks after the film premiered. In May, Ariel Lizarga, known as the gang lady who played a grandmother in the movie and used to run drugs for the MA, was shot to death in front of her own home. And a little over a year later, MA member Manuel Rocky Luna was murdered. Almost received several death threats and was so worried that he contacted the FBI and even went into hiding for a period of time. It has been reported that Almost offered Morgan's wife $5,000 as a settlement, but she refused it. Morgan filed a lawsuit against Almost and movie producers for $500,000 for basing one of the characters, JD, played by the actor William Forsythe, on his life without his permission. That's where it was reported that Almost offered Morgan's wife $5,000, but she had refused it. Almost also reportedly requested to speak with Morgan, but Morgan refused to speak with him. The suit was ultimately dismissed, but it said that Almost had been green lighted, meaning placed on the Mexican Mafia's hit list. Some say, however, that Almost ultimately paid the Mafia a large sum of money to remove the green light, arguing as proof that he is still alive today. In 1993, Morgan became ill, and on October 4th, he was transferred from Pelican Bay to the hospital ward in Corcoran State Prison, where on October 27th, he was diagnosed with inoperable liver cancer. Conspiracy theorists argue that Morgan was poisoned by prison authorities because he became too powerful. Morgan ultimately died November 9, 1993, at the age of 64. Morgan's legacy lives on today as one of the best who's ever done it. When you were in Joe's presence, you could feel it. You could tell he possessed not one false molecule, says Nava. Joe even had politicians in his pocket. We maintained it for as long as we could, and we did well, but things were never the same after Joe died. Even Mendoza, the turncoat who put Morgan away for life, was impacted by Morgan's death. When I heard that Joe died, I felt a small twinge of guilt, he says. I didn't really want to give him up. He had an option of choosing a different path, but he made his commitment and he took it to the grave. He had his own sense of humor, whether you agreed with it or not. He lived by it, said DEA agent Joe Moody, who headed the state prison gang task force in the mid-70s. It would be nothing you'd want to hand down to your children, but in his world, he walked above a lot of people.
That's a good article right there, man. I'm gonna give you a little break and I'll speak for a few minutes. Joe Morgan, man. I agree. An architect, a genius, ahead of his time. I mean, look at the things that he was able to establish, man. Connections with the Italian mob, the cartels, judges, politicians. You know, bringing the taxation out there. You know, in the 70s and 80s. Being that he wasn't even of Mexican descent, to have that much influence and power over an organization. Now, I've been told by numerous people who were in the mix around that time, afterwards, and there's some discrepancies and issues about whether he was the official godfather, because they don't really have leadership titles. But I will say that he was probably one of the most influential members within that organization to where it is today. What I find kind of interesting about it is they said that he was, you know, if you read the article, there's a couple things that throw me off though. Very good article though. But they say that he was recruited into the MA after Cheyenne died. But then other portions of it, it says that he did the first hit for the MA, which was that 1971 hit. That was on the streets. That was actually the first ever MA contract kill for the organization out there in the streets when they took out one of their own. I also find it kind of interesting. The two people they're talking about that he had hit were the Aranda brothers. And I think that happened on December 12th or December 15th, 1972. He had gave Manuel Joker Rodriguez, who was a Mexican Mafia member, the orders and directives to have the Aranda brothers hit. And this was at a time when peace was being talked about, right? So that made the whole situation a little bit interesting, that if he wasn't a member, how would he have that much influence within the organization? So maybe he was looked at as an MA associate, like almost of equal stature, and played a pivotal role, because there's pictures of him and Cheyenne and other MA members together on the yard. So I'd like to believe that he was probably recruited during the time when Cheyenne was active. But that hit on the Aranda brothers, right? That kind of sealed the pack of Cheyenne's death. That happened a couple days before, either 2 to 5 days before they actually got Cheyenne. And that's what Hobo was talking about the other day, man. But also in 1972, you know, there were some other things that Joe Morgan was involved in. Fred Castillo, which the AB ended up murdering, which sealed a pact and a truce between the AB and the Mexican Mafia. The AB actually did that hit for the Mexican Mafia. Joe Morgan was influential in that. So you see what I'm saying? So he's been impactful, whether he was a member or not. He was involved, and he was able to wiggle and get all these his public relation skills were like, he was like a politician gangster. You know what I'm saying? His networking process. But see, you know, it talks about the Cheyenne death in this. And so we're going to go into a little bit about this a little bit more. Besides the Aranda brothers getting hit, you had in October 1972, you had who was it? Bullwinkle and Yogi Bear were killed, NF members in Tehachapi by the Mexican Mafia. Okay, up in Susanville, you had Diamond, who was killed in October 72 by the Mexican Mafia. In December of 1972, you had Mike Nolan, who was an NF member, who was killed by the Mexican Mafia. And you also had an individual named Bozo, who was killed in LA County, who was from Orange County by the Mexican Mafia. In addition to that, you had Robert Zapata, they called him Bobby, from Big Bassett, who was a Mexican Mafia member. He was killed by an NF member named Daniel Loza from Chino. So you had a lot of tick for tack murders that were going on. And around they were starting to try to build that peace because we're getting tired of the bloodshed. And like you heard, they used to communicate, they used to talk. You know what I mean? Everybody knows that he was related to Cheyenne was related to Chalo. You know what I'm saying? So there was communications between these organizations. They got tired of the killings, but they continued to exist. And like it says, there was a lot of MA members who did not want the peace. Joe Morgan being one of those. And in fact, that him having those individuals ordering the Aranda's brothers hit by Joker that happened days before, they kind of triggered the effect of where they were for 50 years after, you know what I mean, the war. Because like Mo said, there was a time where they were trying to interact peace. So it's kind of funny that the two big major issues that occurred, Joe Morgan was involved in. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. One, the truce between the AB and the MA, and then the other one being what led to Cheyenne's death.
No doubt. Yeah. You can't dispute his influence and his, you know, impact on that organization, man. And like you said about, you know, being a godfather or whatever, you know, that's just like a figurehead. You know what I mean? Like there's always going to be, like, even in the NF, man, you're going to have generals or whatnot. There's always going to be one that stands out a little more than others, just for whatever reason, based on his charisma, you know, his propensity for violence, his history, whatever the case might be, where he stands, you know, where he more stands out, you know. And you know, you go back in time, right? Now you got Corny, you know, that's like the guy who stands out now. You know, you had Tibbs, you got Skip. All these guys are equal. They're all the same. But what one person does, man, he may be looked at just a little bit different based on, you know, any kind of mitigating factors. And JD, you know, Joe Morgan, whatever, American Me, whatever, they had him playing a role in that movie, as well as in real life. He played that role, man, as a very, very key figurehead in their history, you know. And it's, you can't take that away from him, man, because he was definitely about that action, and he definitely was intelligent as well, you know. And they portrayed it pretty good in the movie, you know. But in real life, man, even my big homies, all they could do was, like, that dude was about it, period. You know, they gave it to him.
Look at his story. I mean, he was killing people at the age of 16 years old, running drugs and guns across the border. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Sewing up stuff with the Italian mob. Like I said, man, the things that he was able to establish at that time period. And you know, it seemed like as soon as he got caught up in the late 70s, man, on that case, man, is when they started to, their organization kind of, like I said, they were kind of underground in the 80s a little bit. There wasn't a lot known to them. And it seems like at the end of his career, there's discrepancies. I've heard some people say that he's the one that implemented the taxation in the 90s. Other people say no, that it wasn't. I don't know. I wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? All I know is the stuff that he had did up until then. He's looked at as their iconic figure.
Yeah.
When you think of a Mexican Mafia member, I look at him on a pedestal even above Cheyenne.
Yeah, I do as well. Yeah.
I mean, Cheyenne has a legacy because he was killed. You know what I'm saying? Thrown over the tier. He was influential. He was he became a radical. as well as he was trying to unite. You know what I'm saying? But as far as to the strategic ways of how they maneuvered as a mafia, as a mob, because I don't think in the beginning, you know what I mean, the Mexican mafia's intentions weren't to be like a mafia structured organization. It was more like some people say, oh no, they didn't need to protect themselves. They were trying to be badass. Every organization, you know, when they try to form any type of group, it's for either protection so they can do whatever bidding they want to on those yards, whether it's a movement or they want to be the biggest, baddest gangs, whatever it may be. I don't think that they had any intentions of this becoming, you know what I'm saying, a mafia. Like I've always been told it was originally called El Mexicano Encarcelado, La M, and that their transformation with people like Cheyenne and Joe Morgan is what led it to be the Mexican mafia.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you know, the interesting factor in here is the most iconic figure within that group. And there's been a lot of other ones, don't get me wrong, was not of Mexican descent. You know what I'm saying? He rose through those ranks and had that much respect. And I think that's where the relationship too, people don't realize between them and the AB, what stood on that the whole time was his relationship with Joe Morgan.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, definitely everything that I've heard about him from, you know, former members of that group and as well as the group I was a part of, you know, he was the most influential member in their history as far as getting things done. And that's, you can't really dispute it, you know, like you're a history buff, you know, all that stuff. And other people we talk to that have access to different kinds of information, man, it's all pretty much universally accepted that he was the driving force in making that organization what it was with the resources it had and the policies that it implemented to be successful. I mean, you can't take that away from him, you know.
What they say about being cut from a different cloth, and that goes for some of the MA and NF too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying, members at that time era, because if you look at the things that they talk about that he did, he wasn't just a leader, right? He was a warrior. You know what I'm saying? You can't take that from him. He was killing people, whacking people. He was doing just as much dirt, escaping from county jails. You know, he was doing it all, man. And you got a lot of dudes now, they want to sit there with their 9-10 man detail teams. You know what I mean? And they want to give the orders and directives, but they don't want to put in that work.
Yeah.
Back then, it was a driving force for you to be able to not only be a leader, but to also take the same action. Therefore, your people respect you because they know what you're about. All those figures at that time, now, whether they were MA or NF, that were leadership positions, they all had to pay their dues.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's the difference. And if you look at things today, is a lot of these people, they rise through the ranks. It's about money. It's about their leadership skills. It's about how they delegate. It's what they could bring forward. What's beneficial. It's not about bringing a body like it used to be.
Yeah, they're not trying to play so many roles nowadays. Then you got your exceptions too, like on the northern side, Skip.
Yeah.
Skip's got good leadership, and you already know what he's capable of doing. He's about that business.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
And he's got that. Those are them individuals, him and Corny, Pegleg, whoever they're a different breed, man. They're going to address every situation to the fullest, be it violence, be it, you know, chess game with the mind, be it whatever the case might be, man. They are a different breed, man, and they're few and far between.
Robot Sosa, no, Robot Salas. Excuse my name. Damn, I get the names mixed up a little bit, man.
I do too, man.
Alfie Sosa. You know what I mean? All those cats. You know what I mean? I heard Conejo. You know what I mean? Our Blajos. I heard that dude was strictly with the business. You know what I mean? I was talking to our guest we had on the other day. He was mentioning a few of them. You know what I mean? He said Conejo was with the business, most definitely, man. But yeah, Joe Pele Morgan, this is an interesting article, man, and it sheds light into a lot of different things. And, you know, I hope a little bit of things we were able to elaborate. You know what I mean? You know, you can maybe take a step back and say, you know, whatever you think of him and you know, his actions triggered a how you say it, long-term effects between these two groups.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's alleged, like I said, it's alleged that he gave Joker the orders to hit the Aranda brothers. If he did, that's what caused a ripple effect to where Cheyenne was held accountable because Cheyenne gave his word that the killings would stop.
Right.
So that's always, so, you know what I mean? That's the thing that you got to realize is Was there a falling out between these two? There's different rumors, like they say in this article. You know what I mean? I don't know if you have one person that's trying to mend fences and bring peace and have a truce. You know what I'm saying? And you know he's put himself out there on Front Street, and you elect to still take action. I have a hard time believing that he did not know that Cheyenne wasn't going to suffer those consequences.
Oh yeah, you're not just going to kill two members and the day before a meeting, 3 days before a meeting, and yeah.
I'm not sure if they were killed, but they tried to. They hit them. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? But there was a few other people. Like I said, there was murders that were going on. There was, like I said, I was able to calculate at least 6 murders that happened. 5 of them were by the MA. No, 4 murders were by the MA, 1 by the AB, and then I was able to confirm 1 NF killing 1 MA member at that time. There was also numerous hits, and this was all the way up until October. You know what I'm saying? Like they say, there was a 4-year war from 68 to 72, tick for tack. I mean, associate or member, I don't care. People were dying on both sides, man. It was happening. And a lot of people were getting tired of the bloodshed. And, you know, Cheyenne tried to be an impactful person and to bring in, he had a whole different vision, you know what I'm saying? And to unite Raza, both factions. You know what I'm saying? So I think that there's no way that they couldn't have known that these type of actions, you know what I mean? You even have a Mundo at that time that talks about he was in Quinton and he was calling them farmers and this and that, trying to stir stuff up because he didn't like this truce that they were trying to have at that time, man.
Yeah.
You know, but needless to say, regardless of what we feel by his actions, I mean, the dude was crafty, knew what he was doing. He was an architect. He built them into what they have become today. Without him, there would be no MA.
Yeah, hey, like I said, man, all the older homies that I've talked to, all they could say is he's a worthy adversary. You know what I mean? I mean, there's nothing bad to say about him. Like, oh yeah, you know, I might get that dude if I had a chance, but you know, in real life, that dude was about all the folklore around that dude. I mean, the older homies back it up. You know, he was about it, and he was respected. You know what I mean? I mean, you could want to get somebody but still respect them at the same time, and that's the consensus I got from all the OGs, bro.
Yeah.
You know, straight up. I guess that about does it, man, for this episode about Mr. Joe Pegleg Morgan, Matavia legend, MA legend. You know, he paved the way for that group, man. If he's not the most instrumental person, I don't know who else it would be, man. Straight up. All right, YouTube. It's your boy Rojo, Big Flacco. We'll probably be live a little later on this, what is it, Thursday, Flocks? One of us will probably go live a little later, man. So y'all have it your way, man, and we'll holler at you.